A cold crack echoed in the classroom. His guitar was shattered to cheers, but Jaden didn't scream. He clenched his fists, like the video subscribed to the channel, because rising from these broken pieces will make the whole world listen. A paper cup filled with cold water was suddenly hurled at Jaden's back just as he was stepping onto the stage. The water soaked through his worn-out shirt, clinging to his small, thin frame, sending the entire room into a roar of laughter. A shrill voice from the back shouted loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Hey, watch out for the leak coming from that rusty antique." Laughter spread like a cruel wave across the room. Jaden gripped his battered acoustic guitar tightly, his narrow shoulders trembling, not from the cold, but from the choking shame rising up to his throat. That dark wood guitar, scratched and worn, was the only gift his father had painstakingly saved for 2 long years to buy. To Jaden, it wasn't just an instrument. It was his only pride under the harsh lights of Brookstone Academy's performance hall. Jaden made his way onto the stage, each step feeling like dragging boulders behind him. Around him were polished white faces, clutching shiny electric guitars and sleek pianos, their gazes either indifferent or openly mocking. He quietly sat down, his hands shaking as he strummed the strings. The guitar's sound filled the room, rough, raw, but full of soul. Jaden played an old blues song his father had taught him, each note carrying the weight of countless nights the two had spent by a rickety old fireplace. But he didn't make it through the intro. A boy from the back row jeered, "Send that broken guitar back to the street." The room erupted in laughter, a few kids mock strumming and dancing ridiculously to ridicule him. Jaden bit his lip and kept playing. But the whistles, the fake applause, the wall of disdainful eyes swallowed the air around him. Even the judges, the adults who should have protected him, only exchanged glances and stayed silent. At the back of the room, Noah, a chubby white boy with thick glasses. Jaden's only friend, stood up suddenly, fists clenched. His eyes screamed worry for Jaden, but fear of the crowd's cruelty made him slowly sit back down, gripping his backpack. Strapped so tightly his knuckles turned white. Jaden finished the song amidst a cacophony of laughter. Instead of applause, he received a shake of the head from the head judge, who offered a cold remark. Technique, immature instrument, substandard style, far too street. The sound of pens tapping echoed like nails hammered into Jaden's fragile dream. He hugged his guitar to his chest and quietly left the stage, weaving through rows of smirking faces. As he passed a group of boys, a blonde kid pretended to trip, crashing hard into Jaden's guitar, nearly knocking it to the floor. Another wave of harsh laughter broke out. Jaden's grip on the guitar neck turned his knuckles bone white. But he didn't turn around. He didn't speak. He just kept walking, step by step, as if stopping would shatter him completely. In Jaden's heart, a whisper rose. "I will not break. Not here. Not now." And he clutched his beloved guitar tighter than ever, moving forward into the heavy darkness of the cold hallway. The day after the showcase, Jaden thought things would quiet down. He was wrong. The cruelty had only just begun. The next morning, when Jaden opened his locker, a foul stench hit him like a punch. Inside, someone had stuffed piles of garbage, sandwich wrappers, empty milk cartons, even a reeking sock. Taped to the inside of the door was a crumpled piece of paper crudely scribbled, with a drawing, a black boy clutching a broken guitar. Underneath, messy handwriting read, "Trash musician." Jaden stood frozen. A few students walked by pretending not to see, though smirks betrayed them. A red-haired boy snapped his fingers and a group of friends burst into stifled laughter. Swallowing hard, Jaden quietly cleaned out the locker, stuffing the trash into a plastic bag and throwing it away. No one offered to help. No one asked if he was okay. Not a single soul. That afternoon in the music room, Jaden became a target once more. He carefully placed his worn guitar on a stand in the corner before joining the theory class. While Jaden was busy scribbling down notes, a group of students snuck toward the stand. They untwisted one of the guitar strings, tangled it messily, and reattached it, pretending nothing had happened. When Jaden finished class and eagerly picked up his guitar to practice, the sabotage string snapped the moment he strummed. It whipped across his cheek with a stinging slap. The sharp twang echoed through the room. Jaden flinched, barely catching the guitar before it slipped from his hands. Laughter erupted from a corner of the room. "Maybe you should switch to a toy guitar," one kid jeered. "Even the strings know you're a reject." Jaden turned, locking eyes with Ethan, one of the school's star electric guitarists, son of a famous record label executive. Ethan smirked. Unapologetic. No one intervened. Not the students, not even the teacher, who merely glanced over before coldly returning to his notes. To them, Jaden was just a blemish, an eyesore in their glossy world. Jaden bent down, picking up the broken string. He sat in a quiet corner, replacing it with trembling hands. No words. No complaints, only his dark, steady eyes burning with a silent endurance and a slow, cold rage growing stronger every day. That night, Jaden sat on his bed, under the dim yellow glow of his lamp, running his fingers over the scratched neck of his guitar. He lifted the instrument gently, strumming a sorrowful tune. The notes quivered through the air, fragile, raw, yet unbroken. Jaden knew the bullying would not stop, but he also understood something deeper. If he gave up now, if he let go of this guitar, he would be crushing not just his own dream, but the lifelong hope his father had poured into him. And so Jaden swore with every fiber of his bruised but unbroken soul, he would never let that happen. In a sea of cold stares and mocking laughter, Jaden had only one ally, Noah, a chubby white boy with thick glasses and a mess of blonde hair, always hovering awkwardly at the back of the class. No one at Brookstone really cared about Noah. They called him the human dough ball or the balloon about to pop. But at least Noah understood what it meant to be on the outside. The day Jaden opened his locker to a pile of trash, it was Noah who first approached him, holding out a fresh garbage bag and mumbling. "Let me help," Jaden nodded silently. He didn't smile, but his hardened eyes softened for a moment. They cleaned up the mess together while Noah muttered under his breath, "Bastards, they're all bastards," before hurling the reeking sock into the trash like he was throwing away his anger along with it. From that day on, they became an odd pair. They didn't need many words. A glance was enough to understand each other. Every time Jaden faced a new cruel prank, Noah would show up awkward but earnest. One afternoon when Jaden was practicing guitar in the study room, Ethan and his gang strolled past, sneering, "If you're gonna play that hobo guitar, better go busk at the subway station and free up a seat here." Jaden tightened his grip on the neck of his guitar, eyes dropping to the floor. But before Ethan could take another step, Noah shoved his way in front of Jaden. Arms outstretched, face flushed red. "Get lost, dirt brain!" Noah shouted, his voice shaking but firm. Ethan roared with laughter. "Look at the fat hero," he jeered, and the gang snickered as they walked off. But for the first time, Jaden didn't feel completely alone. During the long lunch breaks when everyone else gathered in noisy cliques on the school lawn, Jaden and Noah would slip away to the old oak tree behind the building. Jaden cradled his guitar. Noah cradled a crinkling bag of potato chips, and together they created rough, clumsy music full of life. "I think," Noah said once mid-chew, "you should have a band. Call it the Survivors." Jaden laughed for the first time in weeks. "That sounds pathetic," he teased. "Yeah, well, it's real." Noah shrugged, a mischievous spark glinting behind his glasses. "You and me, we survived this hellhole, didn't we?" Jaden nodded. "Yeah, we'll survive, and we'll do even more than that." One time when Jaden was rehearsing his solo for the midterm showcase, Noah sat cross-legged beside him, eyes glued to Jaden's hands moving over the strings. "I think you're amazing," Noah said quietly with no trace of a joke. "I think you play better than anyone in this whole damn school." Jaden paused, looking over at him. Not because of the compliment, but because Noah said it like it was an obvious fact, not out of pity or flattery. "Thanks," Jaden said simply, but inside a small warmth bloomed. Little by little, they built a tiny world of their own, a world with no mockery, no judgment, only impromptu songs under the ancient oak tree, genuine laughter, and a small, stubborn promise, whispered like a prayer. "We won't give up." Jaden knew without Noah he might have been crushed long ago by the damp, heavy days at Brookstone. But because of Noah, every time he was knocked down, he had a reason to stand back up, to clutch his battered guitar close to his heart, and keep moving forward in a world that tried to erase him. Sometimes just one person believing was enough to keep Jaden's fragile flame alive. The price of daring to lift your head in a place like Brookstone was steep. Jaden realized that within just a week after his disastrous performance. The third time it happened on a Monday morning. When Jaden pushed open the guitar classroom door, the room was already packed. Laughter rippled the moment he entered. Pasted across the whiteboard were mocking posters, his face photoshopped onto flyers for cheap guitars with red marker scrawls. "Street specials play, 5 minutes break, 5 strings." Ethan lounged against the teacher's desk, tapping his hand rhythmically and whistling tauntingly. "Hey, maestro," he called. "Give us an encore of the string-breaking show." Jaden froze. His lips pressed into a tight line, His hand clenched the neck of his battered guitar. Still, he stepped forward silently, peeling down the posters one by one. Whispers and cruel chuckles circled him like a pack of hungry sharks. Noah sat frozen at the back, face flushed, gripping the edge of his chair until his knuckles turned white, his eyes burning with helplessness. After class, as Jaden quietly packed up his things, Noah shuffled over, mumbling, "They're just idiots. You play 1,000 times better than any of them." Jaden just nodded, his face dry. No tears, only a thick layered numbness in his eyes. But the fourth time, things escalated further. That day, class was held outside for a performance workshop. Each student had to play a short piece in the school courtyard. When Jaden's turn came, he cradled his old guitar and stepped into the circle. The first notes of his guitar barely floated up when Ethan mockingly whistled, and suddenly a tennis ball zipped past Jaden's head, narrowly missing the guitar. Jaden flinched, his fingers halting. Howls of laughter erupted. "Oh, sorry, guess your slow hands can't catch," Ethan called out, feigning innocence, waving his arm to rally his friends. Another ball shot forward, this time striking the guitar's body with a sharp thud. Jaden gripped the guitar tightly, stepping back, his eyes flashing with a rare searing anger. "Stop," he said, his voice low but clear. Ethan shrugged, smirking. "Oh, look, the trash kid speaks." The crowd howled with laughter again. Jaden turned away without a word, hugging his guitar to his chest and walking steadily out of the circle. Behind him, he heard Noah mutter under his breath, "Freaking cowards." But Jaden didn't turn around, not because he didn't want to, because if he opened his mouth now, he was afraid he would scream, afraid he would smash his only guitar against their smug faces and lose everything he still had. So he chose to walk straight through the sneers, the cruel laughter, and the averted pretending not to see stares of the teachers standing at a distance. That afternoon, Jaden sat beneath the old oak tree behind the school. The battered guitar rested on his lap. His hands moved slowly, coaxing soft notes from the strings. No audience, no stage lights, only the whisper of leaves in the breeze and slivers of golden sunlight filtering through the branches. Noah sat beside him, saying nothing, just quietly tearing open a bag of potato chips. He broke it in half and handed a portion to Jaden. Jaden smiled, a weary but genuine smile, then lowered his head and let the music flow from his calloused fingers, from a bruised but unbroken heart. They could hurt him. They could try to break him. But they would never take this guitar away from him. Just as they would never steal the dream, burning quietly, stubbornly inside Jaden's chest. Friday came, and the moment Jaden stepped into the music room for rehearsal, he sensed something was wrong. The room was unnaturally quiet, nothing like the usual chatter. Whispers floated through the rows of seats, punctuated by barely stifled giggles. Jaden clutched his guitar tighter, slowing his steps, but it was already too late. The moment he set his battered guitar down onto a bench, a sharp crack echoed beneath him. Jaden looked down and realized someone had smeared superglue all over the seat. His worn, ripped jeans were stuck fast, fused to the wood. A blonde-haired boy piped up, feigning surprise. "Whoa, looks like even a street musician can finally stick to the stage." The entire room erupted into cruel laughter. Jaden flushed crimson, gritting his teeth as he tried to pull free each tug, scraping painfully against his skin. Finally, with no other choice, he had to wriggle out of his jeans, right there standing in only a pair of thin gym shorts under a sea of gleeful stares. Phones flashed as kids raised them gleefully. "Smile for a street star," a curly-haired girl cackled, her grin splitting her face in the back corner. Noah sprang to his feet, his face beet red. He rushed forward, yanking a phone from one kid's hand and shouting, "Delete it now!" "Look, the fat kid's gone wild," someone sneered. But under Noah's glare, the boy grumbled and deleted the photo. Jaden bent silently, picking up his guitar. He didn't respond to the mockery still buzzing behind him. He slung the guitar over his shoulder and walked out, never once looking back. "Jaden, wait!" Noah jogged after him, breathless. "Don't let them break you, man. You're better than all of them combined." Jaden said nothing. He only gripped his guitar tighter. His eyes darkened, his small shoulders tensed, as if trying to bear the weight of a sky collapsing onto him. That afternoon, Jaden sat alone under the familiar old oak tree, his guitar resting across his lap. He didn't play. He just sat there motionless. The fading sunlight dusted his silhouette in a thin coat of gray. A squirrel darted past, pausing to curiously study Jaden. Jaden let out a soft, broken chuckle, a sound sadder than any song that had ever come from his guitar. "You know," he whispered, voice nearly cracking, "they think they can kill me with this crap. But I'll show them I play with my heart, not my clothes, not their stupid fame. The wind stirred the withered leaves as if listening, carrying his vow across the empty field. And Jaden, hands tightening around his guitar, swore, no matter what tomorrow brought, he would never kneel to them. The day of Brookstone's internal talent competition arrived, and the air was thick with excitement and rivalry. Contestants crowded the auditorium, dressed in extravagant outfits, cradling gleaming new guitars, or standing proudly beside the most cutting-edge keyboards. Jaden sat quietly in a shadowy corner, clutching his battered acoustic guitar to his chest. That morning, he had wiped it clean, inch by inch, tuned each string with painstaking care, as if it were a living part of him. He inhaled deeply and whispered to himself, "You won't fail, not today." But no amount of preparation could shield him from those who were determined to push him over the edge. While Jaden stepped out briefly to grab some water, Ethan and his gang moved in. "You didn't think I'd let you walk onto that stage easy, did you, street boy?" Ethan sneered, nudging Jaden's guitar off its stand. "Maybe we should just screw up the tuning," one of the others snickered. Ethan shook his head, a cruel glint in his eye. "No, today I want him to have nothing left to hold on to." Before a few stunned students, Ethan raised Jaden's guitar high above his head and slammed it down onto the hard tile floor. A sharp crack ripped through the air like a scream. The guitar shattered in two, the next splintering shards of wood flying everywhere. When Jaden returned, water bottle in hand, he froze at the door. The first thing he saw was the broken body of his beloved guitar, sprawled helplessly across the cold ground. For a moment, Jaden's entire world crumbled. He staggered forward, his legs barely able to hold him. His shaking hands reached for the broken pieces, fingertips brushing over jagged splinters like touching an open wound. "Who?" Jaden croaked. No one answered, only laughter, low and mean, bubbling from the back of the room where Ethan stood, arms crossed, eyes gleaming with triumph. "Well," Ethan drawled mockingly, "that old junk was bound to fall apart sooner or later." Noah bolted from his seat, his face burning red with fury. "You're monsters," he shouted, his glasses slipping down his nose, his voice cracking with rage. That was a gift from his dad. It meant everything to him. Ethan shrugged, smirking. "If it was that precious, maybe he should have left it at home to worship it." Snickers spread through the room, heartless and cold. Jaden said nothing. He dropped to his knees, cradling the broken guitar in his arms as if holding a bleeding heart. No tears fell, only a deep, hollow ache that swallowed him whole. That night, Jaden sat in his dimly lit bedroom. The fractured guitar lay gently across his desk. He gathered every splintered piece, carefully piecing them together. His fingers brushed over a spot on the body where years ago his father had etched a small, wobbly line by hand. "Play with your heart, not with anyone's permission." The letters were crooked, uneven, and more beautiful to Jaden than any music ever written. "I'm sorry, Dad." Jaden whispered, his voice raw, but then he lifted his head, his eyes burning with a fierce, unbroken fire. "I won't stop. Not for them, not for anything. Not ever." Clenching his fists, Jaden made a silent vow. From these ashes he would rise, and he would silence every sneer, every cruel laugh, even if all he had left to hold on to were broken pieces. Jaden didn't know how long he had sat under that bare old tree on the cold afternoon. The fading light slipped away behind brittle branches, and darkness fell like a heavy curtain, swallowing him whole. On his lap, the broken guitar lay still, sharp wooden shards pressing into his small, clenched hands like tiny knives. "Who do you think you are, Jaden?" he whispered bitterly, his voice dry and cracked. "Some poor black kid with a busted guitar. What, you gonna conquer the world?" He laughed, a hollow choking sound, tasting as bitter as dried-up tears. A soft sound came from behind Noah, approached lugging his oversized backpack. "I brought you some water and a sandwich," Noah said tentatively. Jaden didn't reply. He just bowed his head lower, his eyes fixed on the shattered guitar, his breathing heavy as if he were carrying a mountain on his back. Noah sat down beside him without a word. They stayed silent for a long time. Then Noah inhaled shakily and spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know what you're thinking. Give up. Toss it all away. Pretend you never loved it, never dreamed of anything, so it'll hurt less." Jaden gripped the broken pieces tighter, his knuckles turning white. "But you know what, Jaden?" Noah's voice trembled. "If you quit now, they win. They'll always believe they can crush any dream they hate, with just one shove. Jaden jerked upright, shouting, "I'm tired." His voice cracked the heavy dusk like a whip. "I'm tired of having to fight this whole damn school every day. Tired of walking into every room knowing I'm a joke. Tired of pretending I don't hear them laugh behind my back. Tired of trying so hard and never being enough." He gasped for air, his chest heaving with pain and rage. Noah said nothing, just watched as his friend poured his heart out to the empty sky. Then he quietly placed a hand on Jaden's trembling shoulder. "I don't need you to be strong all the time," Noah whispered. "I just need you not to become what they think you are." Jaden collapsed back onto the ground, his forehead resting on his knees, his body trembling. The cold wind whistled through the skeletal branches overhead, sighing like the grieving breath of the earth itself. He thought of his father, of those rough hands teaching him to pluck his first melodies, of those nights sitting by the old wood stove, sharing dreams stitched into songs, of the words his father once said, "No one can take the music out of you unless you hand it to them yourself." Jaden lifted his head, his eyes bloodshot but now clear of confusion, his voice hoarse but steady. He asked, "Noah, if I keep playing, even if nobody cares, is it still worth it?" Noah nodded without hesitation. "It's worth everything, because it's the one thing no one can ever steal from you." Jaden looked down at the broken guitar again. With all the strength left in him, he gathered the splintered pieces into his arms, holding them close. "I won't let them take it," he said, his voice cracking, but resolute. "Even if all I have left are the fragments." Noah smiled, a wide, radiant smile, brighter than any stage light. "We'll find a way to fix it, and if we can't, we'll find a way to make music with whatever's left." And under that gray, desolate sky, with the wind howling through the empty trees, Jaden made his choice. He would keep fighting, not for applause, not for validation, but to keep his heart from turning to ashes. The next day, Jaden sat slumped over a pile of borrowed music books in the school's dusty library. Beside him, his shattered guitar was wrapped tightly in duct tape, lying silently like a witness to everything he had endured. Other students passed by, throwing sidelong glances and muttering cruel words. Jaden was too used to caring about. But today a different battle raged inside him, to keep going or to give up. His hand clenched the edge of the book, his mind spinning with the cruel voices screaming inside his head. "You'll never win. Nobody wants your cheap music. You're just a joke." Jaden squeezed his eyes shut, his palms slick with sweat. "How long are you planning to sit here like a target, huh?" A familiar voice cut sharply through his spiral. Jaden looked up to see Noah standing there, hands on hips, his face flushed red with anger. "They want you to break, Jaden," Noah said, his voice shaking. "If you sit here silent, you are handing them victory." Jaden gave a bitter laugh, one that didn't even touch his eyes. "I'm tired. Noah, maybe they're right. Maybe I don't belong here." Noah yanked out a chair and slammed it down across from him, making the dusty books on the table tremble. "Listen to me, Jaden," Noah said fiercely. "You're good. I'm not just saying that to make you feel better. I've heard you play that battered guitar since the strings were practically hanging off, and every note you played made me believe there's still something good left in this world." Jaden shook his head, his eyes glistening. "But the guitar's broken." "Noah, it was all I had." Noah leaned in, his voice urgent. "So what if the guitar's broken? You're still here. Your heart's still here. Music isn't trapped in a piece of wood, Jaden. It's in every heartbeat, every trembling finger, when you play those sad songs better than anyone I've ever heard." Jaden said nothing, his small shoulders trembling. "My dad used to say," he mumbled, "music is the one thing no one can take from you. But why do I feel so empty?" Noah clenched his fists, staring at his friend as if willing strength into him. "Because they're trying to make you believe you're worthless, but you're not. You're bigger than all of them combined. You just have to stand up, even if all you have left is a shattered piece of yourself." Jaden gave a shaky laugh. "A shattered piece, huh? Sounds about right." Noah grinned, that goofy, loyal grin only a real friend would wear. "Yeah, well, even a shattered piece can make the most beautiful song if it still knows how to feel." They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the soft rustling of pages in the faint sunlight filtering through the grimy window. Finally, Jaden exhaled deeply and stood up. He bent down, lifting the broken guitar as carefully as if it were a piece of his soul. "I won't give up," Jaden said, his voice low but solid as a mountain. "I'll play, even if there's only one string left." Noah jumped up, clapping him hard on the shoulder, nearly knocking both of them over. "Now that's the friend I know." Jaden nodded. For the first time in weeks, a tiny but fierce spark flickered inside his chest. It wasn't a glorious victory. It wasn't an easy triumph, but it was a silent promise that Jaden would rise from the wreckage and turn all the pain into music. The day of the talent show rehearsal arrived, cloaked in a heavy, expectant silence. Jaden sat at the very back of the auditorium, clutching the battered guitar Noah had helped him patch together with glue and duct tape. The rough, uneven wood now looked almost grotesque next to the brand new, gleaming instruments sparkling under the stage lights. But Jaden no longer cared. He had made a promise to Noah, a promise to himself. The loudspeaker crackled, calling all students and teachers to gather in the hall. Jaden rose slowly, pushing open the door as blinding light flooded his face. On stage, the school administrators stood stiffly in a line, their faces oddly tense. A pudgy teacher gripped the microphone, his voice trembling. "Today, we have a very special guest joining us." The room immediately buzzed with whispers. Who a celebrity? A sponsor. "Please welcome the legendary pianist, Mr. Marcus Reed." The teacher's voice nearly cracked from excitement. The backstage door swung open. A tall black man in a crisp black suit stepped out, his salt and pepper hair gleaming under the lights. His every stride steady, commanding every stare. In the room, Jaden's mouth fell open. His heart pounded wildly against his ribs. Marcus Reed. He had heard that name hundreds of times on the radio and music news. One of the greatest black musicians in the world. A man who had graced the grandest stages, won countless prestigious awards. And now he was walking into the very school where Jaden endured daily humiliation. But the bigger surprise came next. When Marcus Reed stopped at center stage, he scanned the crowd, searching. His amber eyes landed on the farthest row, where Jaden stood frozen, clutching his broken guitar. Marcus smiled a warm, knowing smile and stepped off the stage, walking straight toward Jaden, ignoring the rising waves of gasps and murmuring that rippled through the auditorium. He stopped right in front of Jaden, gently placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, and said in a voice as deep and rich as a winter piano ballad, "Hello, Jaden. Sorry I'm late, but I made a promise to your father that whenever you needed me, I'd be here." Jaden's throat closed up. He could only stare wide-eyed at the great man standing before him, the man the whole world revered, now treating him as if he were the only person in existence. "You, Uncle Marcus." "Uncle?" Jaden stammered. Marcus laughed, a booming, joyful sound that chased away all the gloom in the hall. "Yes, it's me. And I think it's time you show them the music in your blood, but isn't something a few cheap tricks can break." He lifted his chin toward the stage, eyes blazing. "We'll perform together, Jaden. Are you ready?" Jaden gripped the guitar tighter. All the pain, humiliation, and exhaustion of the past months melted away, replaced by a fierce, glowing strength. He raised his head, his eyes shining with a light no one had ever seen before. "I'm ready, Uncle." And as Jaden stepped onto the stage side by side with the man who believed in him, Brookstone's auditorium fell into a stunned, breathless silence. The only sound left was the steady footsteps of a boy who had once been broken, now walking toward the spotlight with hands that still held every shattered dream and every unbroken piece of himself. When Jaden and Marcus Reed walked side by side onto the stage, the entire auditorium was swallowed in a heavy, stunned silence. The whispers died away. The mocking glances vanished. Only raw, wide-eyed astonishment remained. The school administrators scrambled to their feet, awkward and pale, while some teachers muttered nervously among themselves, looking as if they had just realized they were witnessing a brewing earthquake. Marcus Reed strode to the podium, gripping the microphone with the effortless composure of a seasoned performer. He swept his gaze across the auditorium, sharp as a blade, yet warm as winter sunlight. "Good morning, Brookstone." He began, his deep, resonant voice carrying through every row, every breath. "It's an honor to stand here today, not just as an artist, but as family." He glanced at Jaden, a soft smile flickering across his lips. "Yes, many of you probably don't know this, but Jaden Brown, this small boy beside me, he is my nephew." A wave of gasps rippled through the room. Murmurs erupted like a hive. Disturbed Ethan, sitting mid-row, gaped so hard his guitar slipped from his lap and clattered to the floor unnoticed. Madison, the golden-haired queen of Brookstone, let out an audible, "No way!" her face frozen in disbelief. Marcus raised his hand, commanding silence. "I have been watching Jaden from afar." He continued, slow and steady, each word weighted with undeniable gravity. "And I know exactly what's been happening here." His eyes swept over the crowd, pausing meaningfully on Ethan's now ashen face. "I know about the jokes, the mockery, the humiliation." Several teachers lowered their heads, unable to meet his gaze. "What you don't know," Marcus lifted his chin, his voice turning to steel, "is that Jaden isn't lucky. He is music raw, honest, and unbreakable. Music that doesn't need stage lights or grand pianos to shine." He paused, locking eyes with the sweating principal at the front. "And let me remind you," Marcus added coolly, "who has been the primary sponsor of Brookstone's Arts Scholarship Fund these past 5 years. Another wave of murmuring burst across the hall. Those who knew stared in shock. Others leaned in, whispering frantic questions. Marcus smiled again, a thin, glinting smile that cut sharper than any reprimand. "Yes, it's me, Marcus Reed." The auditorium erupted into a silent, chaotic storm of disbelief. The principal stammered, We are so grateful." But Marcus cut him off with a small, dismissive wave. "I'm not here for thanks," he said flatly. "I'm here to remind you of one simple truth. Talent doesn't ask for permission to exist." His voice rang out like a symphony crashing against the walls. "If you cannot respect music in its simplest, rawest form, you have no business standing on any stage." Standing tall beside his uncle, Jaden gripped his patched-up guitar, his heart pounding like a battle drum. In that moment, he no longer felt small, no longer the lost boy adrift in a hostile sea. He felt part of something vast and unbreakable, a beat of a rhythm too powerful to ever be silenced. Marcus finished with a single line that would cut deeper than any lesson Brookstone had ever tried to teach. "Talent does not need your permission to exist." He lowered the microphone, placed a firm hand on Jaden's shoulder, and together they turned and walked away, leaving behind an auditorium suffocating under a weight of stunned awe and overdue shame. The noise in the auditorium gradually died down, replaced by a taut silence like the surface of a lake freezing before a storm. Jaden sat quietly on the stage chair, his patched-up guitar resting firmly on his lap. Beside him, Marcus Reed settled before the gleaming Steinway grand piano, his hands resting casually on the keys as if he had played them his whole life, and indeed he had. The stage coordinator stammered, "Name of the piece?" Marcus smiled and replied simply, "Whispers of the Street." The coordinator hastily scribbled it down, his eyes glued to them as though witnessing something unbelievable. As the stage lights shifted to a soft blue, the auditorium plunged into semi-darkness, leaving only the two of them bathed in a gentle glow. Jaden inhaled deeply, his fingers brushing lightly across the guitar strings. Marcus nodded slightly. A signal, "Ready?" The deep, mellow sound of the piano rose first, each note small and delicate, like raindrops falling on a still lake. Jaden waited for a beat, then joined in with his guitar, rough-weathered but achingly heartfelt. The two distinct sounds wove together like rivers, meeting, swirling into each other in a dance of music that needed no explanation. Jaden closed his eyes. He forgot the mocking laughter, the broken guitar, the scornful glances, the endless days of enduring. There was only the music now, the wild pounding of his heart, and the presence of the uncle, guiding him to soar into the sky of freedom. A brief solo passage arrived. Marcus gave a small tilt of his head. Jaden nodded, fingers skimming the strings with growing confidence, sending out notes of blues that screamed, wept, and finally exploded in fierce longing to live. The auditorium held its breath. No one saw the patched-up guitar anymore, only raw music clutching every heart. In the audience, the principal sat frozen. Ethan hung his head low, clutching his expensive electric guitar without daring to lift his gaze. Madison bit her lip, her wide eyes blinking rapidly. As the piece surged toward its climax, Marcus quickened the tempo, the piano keys blazing under his masterful fingers, while Jaden responded with fierce strumming, the music roaring like a river breaking free. A boy from the streets with a battered guitar now commanded the stage like a deity. The finale neared. Together, Jaden and Marcus slowed each note, softening like the final breaths of an autumn afternoon. The last three notes Jaden played were simple yet heavy, a farewell to humiliation, a declaration to the world. The music stopped completely. The auditorium remained silent, so silent you could hear hearts pounding in the heavy air. And then somewhere a single clap rang out. One beat, then two, then three. The applause spread like wildfire, and soon the whole auditorium erupted, people leaping to their feet in a deafening ovation. Jaden lifted his gaze to the audience. In the flashing lights, he saw faces filled with awe, with regret, with admiration. He saw Noah in the third row clapping so hard his palms turned red, shouting at the top of his lungs, "Yeah, Jaden, you're amazing!" Marcus placed a hand on Jaden's shoulder, squeezing gently. "You did good, kid," he whispered. Jaden smiled a smile radiant with light and pride. No more words were needed. The world had heard his voiceless song, and this time they could not turn away. Jaden Brown, the boy with the broken guitar, had conquered them all. As the applause gradually faded, a strange atmosphere blanketed the Brookstone Auditorium. It was no longer the silence of indifference or contempt Jaden had faced so many times before. It was a heavy, bewildered, almost painful kind of silence, thick with confusion and awkwardness. Jaden stood tall, patched up guitar in hand, sweat beading on his forehead, but his eyes burned bright like a wildfire refusing to die. The principal fumbled with his tie, his face flushed crimson. Mrs. Turner, the music teacher who had ignored Jaden all semester, awkwardly ducked her head, pretending to search through her pile of papers. A few other teachers clapped lightly, out of reflex, their eyes darting everywhere but the stage. Among the rows of students, Ethan sat frozen, his arms limp at his sides, his expensive electric guitar still untouched. Madison, the golden-haired girl who had once mocked Jaden, the loudest bit her lip, her wide eyes glassy with disbelief. Noah, however, was different. He stood up on his chair, pumping his fists in the air and shouting at the top of his lungs, "Jaden! Jaden! Jaden!" At first, a few students hesitated, glancing around nervously, but then little by little, a ripple effect swept through the crowd. Groups of students rose to their feet, clapping louder, chanting Jaden's name with real, undeniable energy. Jaden turned his head and met Noah's radiant gaze, and for the first time in all the bleak, heavy months he had spent at Brookstone, Jaden smiled, not a forced, bitter smile, but a genuine one, warm and free. "Amazing, Jaden!" A voice shouted from the back of the hall, triggering another wave of applause. "Absolutely incredible!" A brunette girl cried out. Students who had once turned their backs on him, who had treated him like a shadow, now stood clapping, eyes sparkling with unhidden admiration. Marcus stepped back up to the microphone, his voice rolling out steady and powerful. "Today you have witnessed what true music can do. It doesn't need a glossy wrapper or fancy technology. It only needs a heart that knows pain, that dares to dream." He turned to Jaden, pride blazing in his gaze. "And I believe today, we all learned the most important lesson Brookstone has ever offered." The principal, his face a mask of embarrassment and forced professionalism, grabbed the mic with a trembling hand. "We, the school, would like to thank Jaden Brown and Mr. Marcus Reed for their outstanding performance." He stammered. A truly inspiring moment. The applause erupted again this time, not reluctant but genuine, though tinged with the shame of those who realized too late what they had failed to see. Jaden bowed low. He needed no apologies. He needed no hollow praise. He had reclaimed everything with his own hands through the music that poured from a heart once broken but never surrendered. Marcus clapped a firm hand on Jaden's shoulder, a silent confirmation. "Come on, kid!" Jaden stepped down from the stage, passing through the sea of students and teachers, now pressing close, their gazes locked on him. Not with pity, not with scorn, but with pure respect. And in that moment, Jaden understood, though there would be more battles ahead, though the road stretching before him would be long and brutal as today, here at Brookstone he had won something priceless, not because of his skin color, not because of pity, but because of talent, resilience, and a heart that refused to yield. The next day, when Jaden pedaled his battered old bike up to the gates of Brookstone, he could feel the strange shift humming in the air. Gone were the sharp, sideways glances he had grown used to. Gone were the whispers and stifled laughter, trailing him like shadows. In their place were furtive glances, awkward, fidgeting looks, and even a few sheepish, clumsy smiles, as if trying to apologize without words. Jaden wheeled his bike into the rack, his head bowed as usual. But a voice called out behind him, making him freeze. "Hey, Jaden, you were amazing yesterday." He turned. It was Chloe, the girl from the advanced theory class who had once sneered at his battered guitar. She flushed bright red, biting her lip, eyes fixed on the tips of her sneakers. Jaden gave a small nod, saying nothing, then turned away. But deep inside, a faint, unexpected warmth stirred. At the cafeteria, something even stranger happened. As Jaden queued for food, he spotted Ethan, the guy who had once hurled a tennis ball at his guitar, sitting rigidly at a nearby table, staring at his lunch tray as if it might attack him. Madison and her group of wealthy friends, normally the noisiest now, sat in stiff, embarrassed silence. As Jaden pushed his tray past them, Madison glanced up, her face troubled, then quickly dropped her gaze and muttered to the girl beside her, "He plays way better than Ethan." Jaden heard every word. He allowed himself a small smirk, not bitter but calm and almost amused. "Jaden," another voice called out. It was Matt, the drummer from the school band, someone who had barely acknowledged Jaden's existence before Matt approached and shifting awkwardly. "We're short of guitars for the upcoming gig. If you're free, maybe you'd like to jam sometime." Jaden studied him for a beat. Maybe once an invitation like that would have made him burst with excitement. Now he simply nodded once and answered evenly, "I'll think about it." As for Noah, he was practically bouncing in place, stuffing half a sandwich into his mouth while pounding Jaden on the back like a jackhammer. "Told you, man," Noah shouted gleefully. "You totally kicked their butts." Jaden chuckled, truly laughed for the first time in months, a sound clear and full rising straight from the bottom of his heart. That afternoon, Jaden sat beneath a familiar old oak tree, his patched-up guitar resting across his knees. A few students lingered nearby, not close enough to intrude, but not so far as to ignore him either. One small boy from the lower grades shyly approached, holding out a battered notebook. Jaden, can I get your autograph?" Jaden laughed softly, heart light as air. He nodded and scribbled his name in shaky but proud handwriting. As the sun set, washing the schoolyard in gold, Jaden strummed gently, letting the notes float upward like tiny fireflies. Around him, the younger kids murmured to each other, not with mockery, but with quiet awe. Jaden knew the change wouldn't happen overnight. There would still be skeptical stares, still awkward silences. But he also knew he had crossed a great distance from the invisible kid no one cared for to someone people now had to respect, through talent, resilience, and a patience as unshakable as bedrock. That evening, as Jaden wheeled his bike back to his tiny rented room, the wind whispering through the long, narrow streets, a new melody stirred in his heart, the melody of hope, the music of a true beginning. Even though most of Brookstone had shifted its attitude toward Jaden after that seismic performance, the truth was not everyone was so quick to let go of their prejudice. Old wounds still festered, bruised pride still lingered, and hostile glances still lurked in the shadows. Ethan was the clearest example. He no longer dared to openly mock Jaden like before, but the glares, the under-the-breath snide remarks, they didn't stop. One day, as Jaden entered music theory class, Ethan, loud enough for his friends, but quiet enough to feign innocence, muttered, "I guess next competition, Brookstone should hand out a new prize. Most inspirational colored artist." "Huh?" Soft snickers followed, not loud, but sharp enough for Jaden to hear. Jaden tightened his grip on his backpack strap and walked straight toward the front of the room without a glance back. He had learned to pick his battle. Those venomous words, compared to everything he had survived, now felt like nothing more than pebbles under the wheels of the life he was speeding toward. Another time during an instrument club rehearsal, Jaden caught the icy stares from a different clique students who once thought his presence at Brookstone was a blemish on their polished world. As he carried his battered guitar toward the practice corner, someone sneered under their breath. "Probably got a shortcut thanks to his rich uncle." Another snorted. "Talent my ass." Jaden heard it all, each word a tiny thorn digging into his skin. But he didn't respond. Not a single word. He simply sat down, plugged his guitar into the battered amp, and let his music do the talking. When the sound rose, raw, honest, echoing, the spiteful whispers faded into an awkward, heavy silence. Noah, as always, stood firmly beside him, eyes blazing with unspoken defiance. "Let them yap all they want," Noah muttered. "You're winning, Jay, not with your mouth, with your hands." Jaden nodded. He understood clearly. On this path, there would always be those who hated. Always those who refused to accept that a skinny black kid with a patched-up guitar could reach heights they never could. But he also knew clearer than ever that his very existence was already an answer. He didn't need everyone to love him. He didn't need standing ovations. All he needed was to stand tall, to play, as if his heart itself was singing, and let the world decide whether it had the courage to listen. In the days that followed, Jaden kept practicing tirelessly. Still sitting under the same old oak tree, his battered guitar producing the most beautiful melodies it ever had. Some passersby would stop listening for a moment before moving on. Some would shrug, pretending not to care. But Jaden didn't need them. He only needed himself and his music, and the dream still beating louder and stronger in his chest. After the earth-shaking performance with Uncle Marcus, Jaden didn't bask in fleeting glory. If there was one thing he understood better than anyone, it was this: talent without discipline was just a weak flame easily snuffed out by the slightest gust of wind. So Jaden threw himself into practice like a boy possessed every morning while the schoolyard was still shrouded in mist. Jaden sat beneath the old oak tree, fingers flying across the strings. The calluses on his hands had grown so thick he no longer felt the sting. Each note he played was a silent vow. I won't stop. At noon, when classmates gathered to gossip and snack, Jaden slipped away to the dusty music room on the third floor, where a battered old piano sat like a forgotten friend. He taught himself new arrangements, broke down rhythms piece by piece, recorded every solo, and listened back with a critical ear. Noah, faithful as a shadow, was always there. He didn't play music, but he showed up with a bag of chips or a bottle of water in hand. Just keep playing, Noah would say, eyes shining bright. We'll show this whole damn school what real music sounds like. Jaden usually just smiled, sometimes nodding, sometimes saying nothing at all, but deep inside he knew. Without this clumsy, steadfast friend, he might have crumbled long ago. Some nights Jaden practiced until his fingertips bled. He would wrap his fingers in duct tape, wipe the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, and keep playing. Every piece, every exercise, every stumble and retry was another battle fought. Every snapped string I'll restring, Jaden whispered to himself. Every fall I'll rise higher. Gradually, the change became impossible to ignore. Even the skeptics that couldn't deny Jaden's meteoric improvement. The music teachers, once hesitant, now spoke in hushed, eager tones behind closed doors. The kid's got raw talent, sure. One instructor confessed during a private meeting. But it's his discipline that'll set him apart. He practices like he's fighting for his life with every note. As for the students who once sneered at Jaden, they now fell into a reverent hush whenever they spotted him practicing. They seemed afraid to disrupt something sacred. Ethan, meanwhile, simmered in silent bitterness. He practiced too, but the way Jaden played with heart, with pain, with every cracked piece of his soul, was something Ethan could never mimic. One afternoon, while Jaden was struggling through a brutal solo, Matt, the school's lead drummer, shuffled awkwardly toward him. Jaden, he said, voice hesitant, we're putting together a band to compete at nationals this year. Would you want to play lead guitar with us? Jaden paused, lifting his head slowly. Just a month ago, Matt had been one of those who acted like Jaden was invisible. Now in Matt's eyes, there was nothing but respect and a desperate sort of hope. Jaden smiled a calm, hardened smile. I'll think about it, he said, the same answer he had once given. But this time, deep down, Jaden knew he was different. He no longer needed anyone to pave his way. He would carve his own path with these hands, with this battered old guitar, and no one could ever take that away from him. The night of the school's talent show final unfolded under a sky littered with stars, the outdoor stage ablaze with lights. Brookstone wore a different face tonight. Banners fluttered in the breeze, rows of chairs packed with students and parents, and a hum of anxious excitement crackled before each performance. Jaden sat among the contestants, his patched-up guitar resting quietly on his lap. No new coat of paint, no new strings, just the resilience forged through every long, bruising day. The announcer called out, "Next up, please welcome Jaden Brown with his special piece, Rise from the Dust." A ripple of applause followed. Not deafening, not overwhelming, but sincere. Jaden drew a deep breath, gripped the neck of his guitar tighter, and stepped into the flood of light. The stage seemed to shrink until it was just him and his battered old guitar. Jaden sat down, adjusted the microphone lower to his level, and began to play. The first notes rang out deep, warm, and unyielding. Each chord carried old scars. Each melody summoned buried memories, rising together in a song filled with pain, pride, and fierce defiance. As the music flowed, Jaden lifted his gaze across the sea of faces. There was Noah, waving both arms wildly, shouting, "Go Jaden!" Chloe sat beside him, her eyes shining. Even the principal, Mrs. Turner, and the once dismissive teachers now sat quietly clapping along in rhythm. At the corner of the stage, Marcus Reed leaned against a lamppost, arms folded. His face glowing with pride, too vast to hide. When their eyes met, Jaden gave a small nod, a silent thank you. He didn't need saving. He had only ever needed a chance. Tonight he had claimed it for himself. The music built, growing faster, pounding like the heart of a warrior charging into battle. Jaden attacked the final section, his fingers a blur, the strings ringing out like a cry of freedom. When the last note faded into the night, a deep, stretched silence filled the world, thick enough to choke on. And then from somewhere near the stage, a single pair of hands clapped. Then two, three. And suddenly the whole crowd erupted into thunderous applause. Jaden rose, clutching his guitar against his chest, and bowed deeply. He didn't need a trophy. He didn't need a golden plaque. In that moment, Jaden knew he had already won over prejudice, over cruelty, over the fear that once crushed his chest like iron. A reporter from the local newspaper pushed through the crowd, microphone in hand. "Jaden, any words after this incredible victory?" Jaden smiled lightly, a calm, grounded smile. He spoke, his voice ringing clear and steady. "I didn't win to be accepted. I won to remind everyone that true strength isn't crushing the weak. True strength is standing up even when all you have left are yourself and the broken pieces." The applause grew louder, rolling through the night like a living force. A soft breeze swept over the stage, ruffling Jaden's hair, his guitar strings, his proud, unwavering smile, the smile of a boy once called street kid. From that day forward at Brookstone, Jaden Brown was no longer the bullied boy, no longer the out-of-place black kid clinging to a battered guitar. He became something else entirely. A symbol of music, of resilience, of those who know how to rise from ashes and claim the world with their own two hands.